Okay, so let's go ahead and start. Covert papers, as we all know, a few weeks ago, this paper came out, but and there's another paper that just got accepted. Is this review that Sunny had led. It's the part two that some of you are on. Just we heard yesterday, was it yesterday, 2 days ago, that the paper, 2 days ago, that this paper, the second part two of this was finally accepted. So stay tuned for a link for this soon. I guess for people who are interested, we're writing a part three, which covers therapeutics, potential therapeutics, I should say, and then long COVID aspect to that. So if people are interested in participating and help writing it. I know a lot of the authors here in the second one is already involved, but Sunny's taking the lead. So stay tuned for that too. I think I mentioned to a lot of you that I'm trying to organize a in-person meeting for summer 2024 in Lisbon. There are some potential donors or sponsors, maybe, but if people have, I mean, nothing's solidified yet, but if people have any leads to companies or charities or foundations that would like to co-sponsor, that would be great. But this is sort of the tentative agenda. Oop, I should add aging here because we've decided to add on day one mitochondrial immune, origins life, and aging impacts of non-coding. So the whole idea of this meeting is to have how key regulatory RNAs, meaning non-coding RNAs or other types of regulatory RNAs, might impact all sorts of aspects of life. Originally, when I met Paco, that a lot of you guys know, he had done a really nice meeting in 2019 at the same venue. So that's why I was trying to recapture that. But let's see if we are able to make it happen. And if so, then we'll invite, of course, everyone in our group and other folks to register and try to attend. But if you happen to have any leads for potential sponsors, let us know. Yep. So let's just go to the news. As many of you know, actually, this one article here before I happened, that we do know that there's a new wave approaching that's been coming the past month. But this is a nice ABC news article that talks about. It's kind of summarized. I'm sure for everyone here, this is going to be no surprise. But if you happen to have colleagues or people that you want to send this to, it's actually a really nice kind of a recap of guide of how symptoms, testings, what's currently available for testing, treatments, and vaccines. And we know that finally the CDC recommended that it was not for the new booster coming out, which is already available. There's a climax over here. Put the punchline here, but the before they're saying 65 or older, but CDC finally said and FDA approved this, saying yes, anyone above 6 months can take that new booster that has the modifications and protection against the XBB's variants. So knowing that there's the hospitalizations climbing, as we see here in this article, talking about that, and other worldwide, other people reporting that now that this new booster has been approved, it's already actually available at CVS. So in the US, I don't know about other countries and how the rollout is in Europe or South American countries or Asian countries, or African countries, but hopefully the other countries around the world will be able to get the new booster like the US is. But yeah, so if you wanted to make an appointment, and usually they say within 6 months of your last booster, it's probably good to maybe potentially get another shot. Or if you happen to travel to the US and want to get your booster, it's probably a good idea. All right, so this preprint came out, again, related to the new variants. And you might have heard, of course, we know the BA 2.86 that I've spoken about the past couple of weeks or past month. That one hasn't fully taken off yet, but that was the one people were considering based on so many 30 different mutations it has, that it was going to be very immunoevasive, and an advantage it has, it might outcompete growth from the other variants that are currently around, which is the XBB and the EG.1.6, the other version of XBB, but the EG 5.1 and XBB.1.5, that one. But so far, from some of the data I showed last week from papers that have come out, they said that this doesn't seem to be as immunoevasive as they thought, so that's good. But it hasn't still fully taken over as people have been thinking. But there's two different versions of this XBB called the flip variant, which is the F and the L. This is kind of from this preprint thing to discuss why, what the mutations are that causes this region here. And this paper actually is a preprint, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's showing that actually the variants that have this flip on there, which is these guys here, they tend to be more immune invasive from the in vitro tests they do, compared to BA2.86 than the XBB.1.5, the EG5.1, the ones that these are the current circulation ones. So that's the one that people are now maybe shifting focus to, because these are popping up in the population. And due to this thing they call flip, the FL mutations that are here, you can see from this paper, and then Eric Topol commented on this too in his Twitter page. But you can see that potentially if these two versions of this XBB takes over due to the F and L or this flip, it can be more immune invasive potentially, and the vaccines could be less effective, although they still have some protection to it. This is another.
Could you explain what you mean by flip?
Yeah, so this I don't know if you can see this region, this part of the sequence here. So this is this S1, S2 region of the virus, like BA.2, BA.2.86 is the XBB.1.5. So there's a two parts mutation, this L455F and this F465L. And you can see here, this is where the mutations are, the FL. They call it flip because it's FL mutation. And it tends to be this region here. Yeah, I think that's clear. Yeah. So I think it tends to be this L and F region here. Whenever there's mutations here, people are get concerned for what they've seen to cause immune evasiveness. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yeah, that's a big help. Flip genetically means inversion, so I wasn't sure.
Right. Yeah. It's a misleading term. It's not any inversion. They use flip because of the F and L mutation sites, So, and this is another plot from the paper showing you the neutralization titers, like an antigenic mapping, as you can see from ABC. So this is with the new bivalent boosters that are out now in the U.S. 3-dose vaccination, the XBB. So you can see this region here, this F456L, and this other region, the L455F, which is that FL, that flip that they're calling. They see here with this regions is a lot more. You see in this antigenic mapping, it's basically, it looks like the concern would be is very outlier. Basically the neutralizing titers is farther away from any of the other groupings you see based on the vaccinations. So that's why people are concerned. You see BA2.86 is also here, but this is a lot more divergent from the rest of the variants. So that's the concern they have. Luckily, these things are not too prominent in the sequencing that people have done, but it's still coming up. So I ran into this Twitter page from this professor from, I think he's from Louisiana, but Mike Horgner. But he did a really nice summary of the wastewater and looking at how the wastewater distribution sort of ties into long COVID cases and then cases per day. Because right now the issue is translating wastewater to actual cases. I mean, there's not very good numbers out these days, or there's not a good number any days about that, because that's the next step. But he does a pretty good job, and what he's saying here is showing that the wastewater levels is of a concern. He's kind of forecasting what might happen based on previous waves and previous trends that they see in the wastewater, and how this could translate to daily new long COVID cases. So we know that now seems like the peak, what he's calling it here, the good news here, is that the peak, as we sort of seem to reach a plateau potentially in the wastewater, which is kind of, and what he shows here too is the Delta, we're kind of sort of at the peak where Delta was originally for wastewater cases. And the forecast is most likely it might start plateauing down. So by October, there'll be fewer and fewer cases according to the wastewater predictions. But depending on indications of school and reopenings not reopenings, but school and people coming back from vacation, people being full on inside, he's predicting, well, and the weather getting colder in some regions in the U.S. This could potentially go higher. It might not be as the plateau might go back up as opposed to going down. But his main point here is also, people shouldn't forget about this, how this could predict potential daily new long COVID cases, because, which I'll go into in the next coming up slides. Long COVID is estimated to be now 5 to 7% with the Omicron and people being vaccinated. Check on the coming up slides. But this is a nice little breakdown he has, looking at the wastewater and some of the predictions he's made, and saying, right now, nearly 2% of the youth population is actively infected with COVID based on what his estimates are from wastewater. Which is still pretty high, considering these numbers. Going to long COVID, this is a nice opinion article from this woman, Lena, when some people were, she was actually kind of controversial because she was kind of diminishing the impact of COVID and long COVID for a while, but now she has long COVID, so now she actually realizes the impact of it. So sometimes people, unfortunately, have to experience it to realize it's real, but better late than never. So she actually does a nice op-ed talking about bringing awareness of long COVID again, and how Senator Tim Kaine has been an advocate of giving more money for research for long COVID and the importance of people being aware of it. But just in case people are interested in reading about it, it's there. What was released about 3 days ago in the CDC, there's this nice slide deck that they released about the epidemiological characteristics of long COVID by this woman, Sharon Sadeh. And there's some data in here that's unpublished, but they made it available now for people to look. So, for example, here, the prevalence of ongoing symptoms. There have been papers that I've talked about in the past few meetings, talking about the long-lasting effects of long COVID. But she showed this is unpublished. Now it's published in the CDC in preliminary data, talking about from 2022 data, the prevalence between age groups. And it seems like the age groups that are more prevalent for long COVID are still between 35 to 49 years of age. As previously, originally, people thought you're older, you got more chance of long COVID, but no, it's the middle age group, or young middle age group, I should say, that's more prevalent. There's some other slides here, and she goes into nicely with the vaccination question, unpublished data that they made public. Some of this stuff here on the top left, people already probably have heard about, like, for example, the higher likelihood of people getting long COVID. There's been a bunch of papers showing that females are likely. They thought older age was, but it isn't. It's actually middle-aged adults, as I just showed you in the previous plot, and adolescents compared to younger children. And then, talks about some links here that talk about severity of COVID illness and so on. But talking about vaccination, right? There hasn't been a really good solid number so far, or numbers talking about how well, the vaccine can reduce your chances of long COVID. And here in these tables, we actually provide some nice numbers. None of this peer reviewed, I guess, there's studies they've done in the CDC, but actually it makes sense when you look at these numbers. The reduction you can see even with Omicron levels with the vaccines, and without comparing unvaccinated to vaccinated. The numbers are sort of low. You can see the end numbers are here, but it's and 900, 157 vaccinated, 300, 478. But I guess this is ongoing work from looking over this from the recover cohorts that they're getting these populations from. And again, this is another plot from their slide deck looking at 1 or 2 doses and how vaccines can actually, and these are from actual papers that have been published from, I think I've discussed in the past few weeks and months, going over vaccinations, and from studies that other people have done and showing that how vaccinations reduces your chances of long COVID. So if there's any unbelievers of this, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but this is some additional new numbers that come up that show the reduction of long COVID chance versus once you're vaccinated, which could also explain the case that we know nowadays, if you get COVID, the chance of long COVID is reduced to now, originally it was 20% for the unvaccinated population. We didn't have the vaccines, or some people say even higher. But now It's estimated to be 5 to like 6, 7%, but this could help
So
additionally.
Austin, this is
Yes.
Steve. This could be a little misleading. I don't know if others are seeing this, but I know colleagues, every time I've gone to a recent meeting that I've talked to, who have had the latest strains of COVID, where fatigue and brain fog have taken 3 months or so. Now this is in that range you're calling long COVID. I don't
Right.
know if others are seeing this, and a number of them are women that I've talked to, and I don't know if it's biased to that, but I wonder if this is a little underestimating that sort of long COVID. It may ameliorate in 6 months or so, but it's still a real nuisance, and it's really bothering people. That's my personal
Yeah.
accrual of data, but I don't know if others are seeing this or not.
Well, women makes sense because they're saying females are getting, for whatever reason that's unknown now, right? Females have a higher likelihood to get long COVID than men do. So that makes sense. And then the numbers, yeah, I mean, again, these are unpublished data, so I don't know. This is from the recover cohort. It hasn't been peer reviewed, so I'm not sure where she, how. No one's vetted it. That's basically. But I mean, actually, this kind of leads to this. That I had. Yeah, so this leads to this paper that just came out in plus one. Maybe this might help sort of that. It doesn't talk about the numbers that you mentioned, but talks about, for example, people who've had moderate, COVID, even mild, is saying basically 11% of these people having mild have lung damage a year later. But they also talk about other things in here briefly. But yeah, in this slide deck, they don't talk about address your point, Steve. So I think that stuff is still, the numbers are so unreliable, in a sense. I guess it's hard to tell the exact numbers.
It just bears watching, I think.
Yeah.
And many of the people I've talked about too are in the age range you've told, sort of in the 30s to the 50. They tend to be reasonably young. Yes, sort of like exactly like you're seeing here. But the numbers are low, but I think it bears watching.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the issue, right? These studies that they do is what population they might target, and then does that represent the bigger population? And the numbers are still low for their population studies they do. So, yeah, I mean, so some people are saying, I've read some articles, well, not scientific articles, but opinion articles, and scientists posting on Twitter that they think the long COVID case numbers should be not 5%, what people are saying, but it should be closer to still to 20%. So I haven't talked about that just because it's just anecdotal kind of information people have, but there's other indication that others would say the same thing that you're saying, Steve. I've seen other scientists like on the Twitterverse and other places saying exactly what you're saying. So you're not too far off with your statement. But yeah, I agree, Steve. I mean, it's I guess someone needs to figure out a good population to study and get the numbers right. The other part is the classification. The other main issue, how do you classify long COVID, as we all discussed in the past, since there's no biomarker. So I think a lot of the stuff that people talk about never gets classified in these studies as long COVID. So the percentages might be lower based on that too, in my opinion. So there's this study, as briefly mentioned a minute ago, this plus one paper that came out this week on Monday, talking about they focused on pulmonary functions after 12 months. And there's not many figures or tables, but it's a brief paper. But what in the patient cohort, again, this is from one of the things that the Recover program provided data for. They saw that and did imaging to look at the pulmonary functions. So from the imaging data, they saw that 11, basically from this plot, you can see predicted mean of the time of illness and the damage done to the lung. Basically, this plot's showing. Mild is a lot less, but even if you're moderate, basically what this plus is, like 11% of people who have had mild COVID or moderate, still have lung damage a year later. Now, they don't talk about long COVID if they're classified as long COVID, because these people might not know they had the lung damage. Or they might feel something, but they might not relate it to their COVID, the time they had COVID. So this is an interesting small paper talking about that. And then this is just a little news article from a New Zealand news article that I thought was interesting just to read. Again, no surprise to anyone here, but this is something people want to read because they did a nice job saying, yeah, people have been COVID fatigue and so on, but it brings up the fact that, kind of loose to what Steve was mentioning. Also, people I don't think the majority of the public doesn't realize, that if you get infected 3 or 4 times or 5th time or the 6th time or however many times you get it, as this quote from this doctor here talks about, where is it? Yeah, people are turning up at long COVID clinics saying, no one told me that my 4th or 5th infection could cause, long COVID, and they never had it before. So that's, I think, just awareness. And basically the article talks about interviewing a few scientists from different regions, talking how they think that COVID may permanently damage the person's immune system. They have few references in here, but they don't talk about any about specific paper. But this sort of makes sense to what we have been showing in our papers and discussing. So this is just a little interesting article interviewing a few scientists and doctors talking about the impact of it and hypothesizing that there could be permanent damage on people's immune system due to these multiple infections, long COVID, and so on. So we have a quick meeting today, but the variants, as I said, distribution against the EG 5.1, this XBB.1.16, and these other ones, various forms of those. The wastewater we went over briefly. As I said, in the U.S., that plateau that one scientist was showing us Twitter is right here from BioBot. Depending on the region you're at, like where I'm at, you can see these spikes going up and down, but it's going back down. That's the trend. One interesting thing that BioBot, I think, added this week, this shaded region here is actually the case numbers that are reported, so they didn't previously have this. So you can see when people stopped reporting cases because didn't match the wastewater as accurately as it did early on. As you can see here, it's like a 1-to-1, and then now it's not. But you can see here that that's the thing that I think that's desperately needed is how do you translate wastewater to exact number of cases. So I think talking to some people here like Adam, we might start thinking of ways to try to help model this and try to figure out and maybe get a paper out just to get that one exact number, somehow get an exact number. If you have this many virons in or this many kinds of detection, amount of detection of the virus in the wastewater, how does that translate to number of cases? I said the variant distribution still is EG.5. This is from the CDC track in the US. You can see the distribution, but it's sort of, again, the variant soup is here. And you can see that the regions of the F and L mutation ones that I showed earlier, the calling flip, is not dominant because you don't see it here. Or the BA2.86 isn't here yet. But you can see the distribution here. There's a bunch of other versions of the XBB that are here, and also close distant relatives, as you can see here from this phylogenetic tree. And again, globally, most places don't report hospital admissions due to COVID these days that well, or ICU, other than the US. But you can see, the US hospitalization is going up, as I said in the news articles earlier, and also in the world, if it's going up, it's that's not being reported, being kept track of.